Welcome to another episode of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast, presented by Southeastern Reptile Rescue and its founder and director, me, Jason Clark.
Are you ready?
All right, and we are here for episode number 23 of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast. My name is Jason Clark. Thank you all for being with me tonight. And on this episode, we are discussing myths. And that's a hard word to say, myths. Myth is myths mainly about snakes. There's myths about a lot of other stuff too, but mainly about snakes. That's what we're going to discuss tonight. And what got me to think of this was a couple weeks ago, I did one of the episodes about books. And I went through, a lot of the snake books that I have, the reptile books that I have. And as I was doing that, I remembered this book. And it's called Snake Lore. And this book was published in the 1960s. And I got it secondhand, a library sale. They were selling old books. I guess people don't check out certain books anymore. They just sell them. And so I got it really cheap. And I've kind of skimmed through the book. And but I decided to pick it up and read it. And it was... I wasn't going to even talk about it on the podcast. I was just reading it just, because I thought it was interesting. And, man, some of the stuff, I've got several things marked in here because I've got to read some of this on the podcast. But it got me thinking of all the different myths there are about snakes. And I think it's a really good topic. So I started trying to make some notes here of different snake myths, and the more I thought, the more they just kept coming. And this is just a few of them. So if you have some myths that you know for snakes, go put them in the chat. Now, we record these episodes live on YouTube every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to join us for the live chat, you can do that. Go to YouTube, SnakesAreUsTV, and you can watch it on YouTube Live. We also have the chat function enabled, so you can chat live. And we'll go to the chat here in just a few minutes and see what you guys are saying. But if you have, if you do have some things that you've always heard about snakes that you wonder if it's true, or especially the things you've heard about snakes over and over that you know is not true. Make sure you put that in the chat. So I'm going to actually go ahead and I'm going to go to my YouTube channel now, and I'm going to pull this up because I want to be able to see what y'all are saying. It'll take me a minute to get in here. Find my YouTube channel. And what I do, I disable ads. So there's no advertisement. At least there shouldn't be any advertisements while we're recording this. Because the first few episodes we recorded, ads were popping up, and it was, you were missing kind of part of the podcast because it's going on live. So I have disabled those ads several episodes ago. So hopefully when you guys are watching this, you're not having to deal with ads. Now later we will put this on there because I got to get paid. Okay, we got to make some money somehow. So let's see here. I don't even know where I'm at. Okay. I guess I'll go to my channel. Why am I having view your channel. Oh, yeah, I'm having such a hard time doing this tonight. Okay, so we're going to talk about mist. Thank you guys to everybody that is in the chat, and let's see who is here. Tonight we have Painted Rocks have come back. Thank you for being here. Angelina Knox. Angelina, where are you from? What state are you from? Assuming you're from the U.S. John, I need glasses so bad. I say this every week. And I've got some glasses here. I do not want to put these on and wear them on camera. So, but anyway, John McBiney Jr. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I hope I am. Hey, Mr. Clark, how are you doing tonight? I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad to be here. Charles Bowden. Hey, Jason. Enjoy your shows. Thank you, Charles. Charles, are you here from Georgia? Have you seen our live shows that we do? David Leos. Let's see. Okay, somebody says I'm echoing. Am I still echoing? The sound is echoey. Yeah, so let me go back out here because we had this issue. Glad you put that up. A couple weeks ago we had it where you couldn't even hear me because my mic was turned off. So let me go in here and let's see if I can find all these mics. There is when I record this, I don't. If you're going to record, like if you're going to go live on Facebook or live on YouTube or whatever, you can get your cell phone out and go live, right? Well, when you're going live on YouTube, you can do that with your cell phone as well. But if you're going to be using a computer, you can't go directly through YouTube to do that. You have to use a third-party software to do that. And trying to see here. Okay, so I got a few different mics here. Let me see. Because I don't want this to be echoey at all. It's going to take me just a second here, guys. Because this software, I thought I had figured it out. And then they went and, unhide all. Okay, so now I can see all my mics. So let me start muting some mics here. Okay. Let's try this one. All right, can you guys still hear me now? If you can hear me now, say, yeah, we can hear you now. All right, hang on. And there's a bunch of mics in here. Okay, so I had all the mics muted, and I shouldn't have had sound. That's what I was wanting to hear. So now, can you hear me? I'm trying to isolate which mic this is. Is it still no sound? Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Is it still no sound? All right, let's see. Turn it up. That's all the way up. Can you guys hear me there now? Can you hear me? Okay, Charles Bowden can hear me. Okay. So the echo should be gone. Can you tell me if the echo is gone? I think it should be gone. For some reason, there's like the camera mic, the computer has a microphone. So there's like all these microphones that are picking it all up at once, and I did not have them muted. So, okay. So Cheesy Cheetah can hear me. David Leos can hear me. So the echo is gone. Good, good. I say it all the time. I am not a technical person, as you guys can tell. I'm definitely not. Okay, so let me get out of here and let me go back to the live chat because I've got it pulled up on my phone, but I don't have good cell phone reception in the studio. So I'd rather go to my desktop computer here so I can see I've got better internet on that. So, okay, so anyway, we're going to be talking about snake myths tonight, and there is no shortage of snake myths. And going back to people in the chat, hello to everyone who's here. If you're new to the chat, most of you I recognize. If you are new, please tell me where you're from. I just think that's cool seeing where so many of you guys are watching from. And it's about to get busy here. I just got back from doing shows in Pennsylvania. I was up there for 12 days, and I did shows for 9 of those days, and it was a lot of fun. It was the Great American Outdoor Show put on by the NRA, and a few 100,000 people came through there. It was really cool. I've done that for many years now, and it's always fun going to Pennsylvania doing those shows. And I did get to drive over to one of my daughters went with me. Both my daughters didn't go because the other one couldn't miss school. But my other daughter went, and so she wanted to go to New York. And so we did drive over to Manhattan one day, went to Times Square, went to some restaurants there, and had a good time. So that was a lot of fun. But we're back in Georgia now. And the whole time I was in Pennsylvania, it was freezing up there. And it was like in the 70s here in Georgia. And as soon as I get back, the temperature goes down again in Georgia, and it's been in the 40s. So I'm ready for some warm weather. And while I was in Pennsylvania, people were already sending photos of snakes. The snakes were out and about moving in Georgia last week, in February when I was up there. So I'm ready for that warm weather to be here because that's going to make it get really busy, which is cool. All right, so Cheesy Cheetah has got the first myth that he's put up. Well, I don't know. Is it a myth, Cheesy Cheetah? People say that copperheads smell like cucumbers. Okay? Copperheads smell like cucumbers. Now, Cheesy Cheetah, I would agree with you that is a myth. I've been around a lot of copperheads. I've been around a lot of cucumbers, and neither one of them smell like each other. Now, here's what I do suspect is there's some kind of a plant. I don't know what it is. And incidentally, people have happened to see a copperhead there, smell that, and then associated the two, and it stuck. And because people are so scared of snakes, are looking for some little hack, some little trick to know where the snakes are. Because the snake always knows you're there before he knows. Hang on, what did I say? The snake knows you're there before you know that the snake's there, right? Because their camouflage is so excellent, and they can pick up vibrations to the ground of you walking up on them. So it's very rare that you sneak up on a snake, And but snakes don't just sit around and emit an odor strong enough for us to pick it up. Now they may poop over here, and that stinks. We can definitely smell that. But as far as just a snake sitting over there on the ground, he doesn't just smell enough for us to smell it. Now, he smells enough for other animals to smell it, dogs and things like that. But if he's putting off that much of an odor to smell like cucumbers, well, cucumbers, are not poisonous to some animals, and that's an edible food. And there's a lot of animals that eat copperheads. So animals would learn pretty quickly, oh, I smell cucumbers. It's either cucumbers or copperheads. We're either going to have a vegetarian dinner or, we're going to have a carnivore diet tonight. And so they would easily be able to sniff out copperheads. So it's advantageous for animals that rely heavily on camouflage to also not emit much odor. Okay. Now, with that said, copperheads, as well as a bunch of snakes, when they get scared, they'll spray out a musk, and that musk is meant to deter you from wanting to eat them. Okay. Well, if it smells like cucumbers, that may make some of you want to eat a copperhead. Okay, that's what they smell like. I think cucumbers and pickles are disgusting. I don't like getting pickles on a sandwich because if I order with no pickles and they put pickles on there anyway, people are like, well, just take the pickles off. But you can't. The pickle juice infuses into everything. You know, like I don't even want pickles on a different plate that's near my plate. Okay, pickles are disgusting and they stink, and nobody should eat them. And when copperheads musk, it stinks, but it don't stink as bad as pickles. Okay, pickles stink, and that, man, I don't know. Anyway, so that's what I think about pickles. Okay, cheesy cheetah pickle juice. Plain no pickle juice. You know, like even vinegar. I can't stand the smell of vinegar. And when I go eat barbecue, like barbecue sauce, if it's like a vinegary, oh man, that's horrible stuff. Why are you guys eating and drinking that stuff? All right, anyway, so if you have, if you had David Leo said, I don't think we can be friends. David, if pickles break me and you up, David, then that's just what it's going to have to be. I apologize. All right, so let's get back to my list here of things, and these are just in no order. These are things that were just coming to my mind after making a list of some things that I often have people come up and are surprised about. One of which, snakes are slimy. Now, I mainly get this from kids, but then sometimes adults who have never touched a snake before think they're slimy too because they're glossy and shiny looking. So one thing I often talk to kids about when I'm at a school or like little kids are there and they're getting ready to touch a snake, okay? And most of them have never touched a snake for the first time. I ask them a question. I say, raise your hand if you've ever played in a sandbox. And all their hands go up. I said, now if you take your hand, you put it in the sandbox, you move it around the sand, you pick your hand up, what's stuck all over your hand? And they all say, sand. Yeah, very good. Now if you take this snake, you guys see how shiny he is? They're like, yeah. I said, now put him in the sand, move him all around, pick him up. What's just stuck all over him? They said, sand. I said, no, nothing. Because you're slimy. Snakes are not. You know, people have oils that come on their skin, they stick to us. So I tell the kids, when you pet my snake, don't get it slimy with your slimy hands, okay? But so that's one thing. Now, as far as touching snakes, here's another one I get, and I even get this from adults sometimes who know about snakes. Is they will say they'll come over with their kid. They're like, okay, you're gonna pet the snake now put it with two fingers, and you have to rub it this way. You can't rub it this way against the scales. You only rub snakes in one direction. That is a myth. Okay, you can rub snakes in either direction. People have this idea that if you rub the snakes in the opposite way, it hurts them because it lifts up their scales. Well, it doesn't do that. But even if you did rub the other way and it just kind of lifts up their scales, it's almost like rubbing your hair the opposite way of the way it grows. Okay, it doesn't injure the snake. It doesn't hurt the snake. How do I know this? You're like, well, how do you know it don't hurt the snake? Well, because, for instance, I've had snakes that were sick and I had to give them injections with a needle, okay, antibiotics. And when you go give a snake a little tiny miniature needle pinprick, it hurts just a little bit. And that snake winches and kind of, twitches and wants to move away from that needle. So that causes pain. But when you're rubbing a snake, even a snake with strongly keeled scales that are rough and rigid, and you can kind of move them and lift them up a little bit, when I do that to a snake, I never see a snake wince or twitch or try to get away from that movement. So that tells me, oh, it doesn't bother the snake because it doesn't seem to care whether I do that to it or not. But people have that misconception that you have to rub them a certain way, and that is not true. Okay, back to the chat. We've got Brett Wetzel listening from the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. I just drove through Virginia on Monday, and it takes 4 hours to get through Virginia. That's a little tall state. Charles Bowden, the Lord knows no snake is going to chase you either. Yeah, I've got that one on here. I'll get to that one in a minute. Yeah, snakes don't chase people. However, we'll get to that in a second. Pickles. Let's stop talking about pickles, okay? Pickles are no good. All right, Chris Taylor is in the chat. Thank you for joining us, Chris. We've got, okay. I don't know how to say your name. I'm going to try it. Jorge M. Villa Salazar. Did I get it right or did I mess it up? Jorge. It's not George. I think it's Jorge. Did I get it right? I don't know. Anyway, thank you for joining us. And where are you listening from? Cheesy Cheetah says, I chase snakes. That's not a myth. That's a good point. I'm with you there. All right. So now the thumbnail of this video that you see is me laying on a bed with a big snake stretched out beside me on the bed. And that is something that I hear all the time. I'll have people come up and say, hey, my friend, it's always a friend of a friend or somebody that told them this. It's never the person. It's always a friend. Hey, my friend used to have this big old python, big old, boa constrictor or anaconda, whatever they got. And they used to let it crawl around their house. And they stopped doing it because that snake would crawl up in the bed with them and would get up there and just lay out beside them. And they figured out that snake was trying to measure them to see if it could eat them. And that is a myth. That is not what any type of species of snake in the entire world does. But it amazes me that people believe it. People believe that, and I think it's just so crazy. When you talk about myths about animals, and I'm sure there's myths about a lot of animals, but deer, for instance, there's different kinds of deer all over the world, but there's not a lot of myths about deer, okay? I'm sure there's myths about bears. There's a lot of myths about bears, but there's not as many myths about bears as there are snakes. I think snakes and spiders probably have the most myths of anything. Snakes, by far, more than spiders, I think. But people just make stuff up. And most people don't care about the truth. That's the thing. Most people don't care about the truth. If it's a good story, that's what they go with. It doesn't matter if it's true. Okay? So snakes don't get in the bed with you and measure you to see if they can swallow you whole. That's not what they do. All right. One more. Snakes are deaf and cannot hear. Well, so I've always said, well, snakes can't hear me talk, or they don't hear my show when I'm doing a show. And I think for the most part, that may be kind of true. But they do have inner ear bones. Okay, snakes do have that, and it's connected to their jawbone. So when those snakes are on the ground, their belly's on the ground, and vibrations from the ground come up and travel through the snake's jawbone, and he can sense that. That's why, if you put your ear on a train track, you can detect the train coming through the solid track more than you can through the air. Sound travels better through solids than just air. And think of these old cowboy movies where you see a Native American Indian or something. They've got their ear to the ground listening for hoof prints or hooves of horses coming up to attack them. And so that's true. So snakes can hear that way. But my friend Daniel Sollenberger, he was telling me there's a new study, and he sent it to me, and I did not read it. I need to go back and look it up. There was a new study talking about how snakes can hear some airborne sounds. And I haven't read the study, but just my guess would be, I wonder if the airborne sounds that snakes can hear are more like low frequency sounds, like a low bass kind of sound that they can pick up and discern more. So that may or may not be true. But snakes can hear, but they cannot hear like we do and most other animals hear anyway. Okay. Another one that I get all the time is about rattlesnakes. How do you know how old a rattlesnake is? I'll ask this question, and they'll say, well, you count his rattles, okay? And that is not true. That is a myth. And the way I try to explain this to people, because I try not to just say, yeah, that's a myth, that's not true. I try to explain it to them where it kind of makes sense, because they've been told this crazy story, and if you just tell them it's not true, hearing it's not true goes out, out in one ear, not the other. But the story they've got is always there. So you got to give them a different story to replace the false story that they've got. And so what I ask them is, especially if it's a woman, I'll say, would you believe it if I told you I could look at your fingernails and tell you how old you are? And I'm like, I know you don't believe it, because if you did believe it, you'd probably wear gloves everywhere you went because you wouldn't want anybody to know how old you are. But you can't tell you how old you are by looking at your fingernails, and your fingernails are made of keratin. Your skin, your hair, your fingernails are all made of keratin, and that's what a rattlesnake's rattle is made of. The same thing your fingernails are made of. How many times a year do your fingernails grow? Well, they grow slowly all year, right? Well, same thing with a rattlesnake. When a rattlesnake is born, he's born with what's called a button. And that little baby rattlesnake already has that little button. And they're so cute. When they shake the little rattle, guess what it does? Nothing. It doesn't make a sound. Okay? It doesn't make a sound. Now, once that rattlesnake is about a week old, and it's usually pretty accurate. It's usually about 6, 7, 8 days, about 7 days, that snake has not eaten its first meal, and it will shed its skin for the very first time. At that time, when that skin comes off, it reveals a new segment. So now the rattlesnake has one button and one segment, okay, and they're interlocked. Now, when that snake shakes his tail, now what happens? Nothing. It doesn't really do anything yet. Now, the snake has used up the yolk that's in its stomach from the mom, and now it's hungry, so it goes to pursue its first meal. And it may eat a meal, maybe 2 meals, maybe 3 meals. But as it eats a little bit, it's going to start to grow. Again, another shed cycle is coming on. Now it sheds again. Now it reveals segment number 2. So now this baby rattlesnake has one button and 2 segments. Now when it shakes its tail, guess what it does? It makes a sound. Not much of a sound, but those rattles are loosely connected. They're hollow. There's nothing inside them, and they just hit against each other. And there's specialized muscles in the tail that make it make a sound. And the longer the rattle gets, the louder it can be, of course. And just like when your fingernails get long and you don't trim them, they get long, they easily do what? They easily break. The longer a snake's rattle gets, as he's out in the woods crawling over rocks and stumps and roots and logs and all this stuff, it easily breaks off. And he's constantly eating and he's growing, and he may shed his skin once a year or 5 times a year, or maybe even more, depending on how much he's eating and how much he's growing. So counting a rattlesnake's rattles tells you you can count. That's about it. Now, if it's a little tiny baby young rattlesnake and it does have 2 or 3, segments, and we can kind of estimate how old that snake is based on its size and based on what month we're in. It's okay, this snake, here we are in July, and this thing has a 1 button and 3 little rattles. The button's still there, and here we are in July. This snake was probably born just this last fall, in late summer or early fall of last year. So, when they're young, we can kind of estimate that. But counting the segments doesn't tell you really anything much. Okay. All right, back to the chat real quick. Chocolate Cookies is here. Hello, that is my mom. If you don't know, my mom, my daughter got my mom's phone and changed her username to Chocolate Cookies, and she does not know how to change it back. So my mom will ever be known on YouTube as Chocolate Cookies. Cheesy Cheetah that sends vibration. Loving Lisa. Hello, Jason. Thank you, Lisa. Where are you from, Lisa? Thank you for being here and watching. Now, Chris Taylor says, it's true how long alligators are between the nose and the eyes, how many feet they are. That's actually true, okay? So what he's talking about is, if you see an alligator swimming out in your lake, and you can see the gator, and you see his nose sticking up and his eyes sticking up, if you can get an estimate, just a guess, of how many inches from his nose to his eyes, just say, oh, it looks about 8 inches, about, then that gator is probably about 8 foot long. So that's a good estimate. Yeah, so that's actually true. That's not a myth. And I actually use that sometime when we're going to have to go catch alligators and we want to know how big it is before we end up with it in the boat or something. Now, this is one that you can't convince people sometimes that this is not true because they know the person that they told them that it happened to. All right? And that is a story of the water moccasin and the water skier. And the story I've been told many, many times, and it's always in some other lake or this lake or that lake or this state or that state. And there was a ball of water moccasins, cottonmouths, and there's a mating ball. They're all just locked up. All these snakes are piled up in there, and this mating ball writhing around, and this water skier comes on and falls and lands in this huge mating ball of copperheads. I'm sorry, of cottonmouths, water moccasins, and they just bite the skier over and over and over. And some stories the skier dies, some stories they live to tell about it. They had 30, 40 bites from all these cottonmouths. All right, so that's not true, okay? And one way we know that it's not true is that cottonmouths don't do a mating ball. They don't do that. Now, you know what does? What? No snake. None of them ball up in a big mating ball. But non-venomous water snakes, what they do, so here in Georgia, we have several non-venomous water snakes. We have plain-bellied water snakes, northern water snakes, midland water snakes. We have a few. And those, those water snakes, the females are bigger, okay? The males are not as big. And that female releases a pheromone to attract a male. And all these males pursue that female. So you may have one female, non-venomous, harmless water snake with 7 or 8 males all wrestling on top of her, trying to get in position to be the one to mate with that snake. So you can have that. And so people see that, and because it's a snake near the water, they think, oh, it's a water moccasin. Oh, it's a mating ball of these snakes. That's what happened to that water skier. They fell into something. Well, they don't do that. And so, anyway, I think that's where that myth comes from, but it is a myth. So that's not what cottonmouths, water moccasins do. Speaking now, water moccasin and cottonmouth, the same snake. Okay. Speaking of cottonmouths, water moccasins, it's often said that they are very aggressive. You don't have to go to them and get bit. They will come to you. They will chase you down to bite you. And there is nothing farther from the truth. And I will have so many people. It's so funny. They'll come up before my show and they'll say, "You got your water moccasin?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got one." "Oh man, that's a bad boy right there. That's the one that gets you. I've been out there fishing. Those things come and get in the boat with you. Try to take your boat over." Now, will they come get in the boat with you? Absolutely, but not to take your boat over. They don't even know that it's a boat. They don't even know that you're in the boat or that it's a boat. They don't know that. These snakes will often hunt from floating vegetation, or they'll get on logs and sun and hunt off the edge of it. And that's all they know your boat is. They don't know it's a boat. They don't know it's your boat. They just want to climb up there, and maybe they smell fish. Maybe you've been fishing. Maybe they smell fish and they want to hide out. And people think it's an act of aggression, okay? This snake is coming up in your boat. It's a venomous snake. It's coming up in here because it wants to kill us and it wants our boat. That is not true. That's not what they do. And it's often people will tell us about snakes, water moccasins, cottonmouths falling from tree limbs into the boat. And this happens all the time. Well, water moccasins, cottonmouths, they can climb trees and they'll get on limbs to sun over the edge of water, but not a lot. Most of those that do that are non-venomous water snakes. Brown water snakes are notorious for that. They'll climb up there and get on the limb, and then when you get close to them, not even close to them, a long way off, the snake sees you, and his first defense is to dive in the water, hit the water, and take off. And if your boat happens to be under that, he may land in your boat. Okay, but people mistake those all the time for water moccasins, for cottonmouths, and that's not what they are. Another myth that I often get is that snakes can jump, like when they strike at you. That, you know, if the snake's over there, he might be able to jump 10 feet to get you. There's nothing you can do. They're just that deadly, and you're out of luck. That's not true. That is a myth. Okay, snakes can't jump. However, let me say this. Pygmy rattlesnakes. Here in Georgia, we have 3 species of rattlesnakes in the southeast. We have the timber rattlesnake, which is the most widespread rattlesnake on the East Coast. Then we have the eastern diamondback rattlesnake, which is the largest rattlesnake in the world. Then we have the smallest rattlesnake in the world, the pygmy rattlesnake. Pygmy rattlesnakes are tiny little snakes, and they have extremely powerful venom. Fortunately, they don't have a lot of venom, so most people that get bit don't die from pygmies, but it's a pretty bad bite. But what I've seen these snakes do is, in the wild, when I've caught them and I've found them and stuff, I'll see them strike, and they'll curl up, you know, and little tiny things are curled up, and they'll strike. And they strike with such ferocity, and they don't weigh but a couple ounces maybe. And because they weigh nothing, when they strike, their body, their little coil might move 3 or 4 inches across the sand in the road where you find them. Okay? And then you think, well, if that little one can do it, imagine a 6-foot rattlesnake. When he strikes, his body would leap 5 or 6 feet. Well, no, they have a lot more body weight to hold them back from being able to do that. So snakes don't jump, but the little ones who don't have hardly any body weight can kind of scoot across the sand a little bit. But it's 2 or 3 inches, maybe not even that far. Okay, and that reminds me of another myth that I don't even have in my notes, and this is what I hear all the time, is that you know how venomous snakes can bite you and inject venom. They also have the ability to bite and not inject venom. That's known as a dry bite. So just say a rattlesnake bites you. Just because a rattlesnake bites you doesn't mean venom is injected. Okay, the snake has to decide to inject venom. All right. So, but what people will say is, well, you know, even if it's a dry bite, if it's a big old rattlesnake, those rattlesnakes hit you hard enough, they can break your leg. It's like a baseball bat. And I just laugh. I mean, it's just like even if you don't know about snakes, just think of the laws of physics. And you know, there's got to be something substantial, some weight or something behind that snake to do that. And yeah, I've been wearing snake-proof boots before, or snake-resistant boots, I like to call them. And I've been hit by 5.5+ foot rattlesnakes on those boots. And it's like that. It's just like a little tap. It's not like a baseball bat hitting you. Snakes can't do that. I've been bit by 12-foot plus pythons, 12 foot long. And these are some big snakes with a lot of power, and they can strike, sometimes 3 or 4 feet out, a huge strike range. And when they strike fast and hard. There's a lot of mass behind them. And even when those hit you, it's not like getting hit by a baseball bat. It's nothing like that at all. The teeth are what hurt. It's not the mass of the snake. So that's a myth. So it doesn't feel like a baseball bat. A snake is not going to bite you hard enough to ever break a bone in your body. You're not going to have a bone broken. It physically cannot happen from any snake in the entire world. I don't care what a snake is. It's not going to break your bones by striking you. They can't do that. Okay. Now let's see what else we got here. This is another one, and this just talks about snake shedding. I hear this a lot, that snakes only shed certain times of the year, only shed in the summertime, the dog days of summer, and that snakes get really grumpy and irritated when they're shedding because they can't see very well and they're more prone to bite. I've heard that for a long time, and I've always kind of believed it. But then the more I think about it, I don't think I believe it because snakes can shed all year long depending on how much they're growing and how much they're eating. So it's not just summertime. I'm talking about the thing I don't know if I believe is whether or not they're more aggressive or they get more agitated. Now, I know that when they're shedding, they can't see very well, so they may be more defensive. They may be more scared because they don't know it's your hand coming to pick up your pet ball python. Maybe they get more scared from that. But I don't think snakes get mean or vicious because they're shedding. They might get scared because they can't see well. But that's about it. Another one that we get all the time is the myth of the hoop snake, and I think usually this is attributed to the coach whip. Here in Georgia, the southeastern U.S., we have a snake known as a coach whip, and this snake is a very long, very skinny snake. It may possibly be over 7 foot long and as big around as a quarter or maybe a 50-cent piece. Very long, very skinny snake, but very fast snake. And one myth I've heard over and over and over growing up was these snakes are fast because what they do is they bite their own tail and make a hoop. And they can, if you're running from it, you're out of luck because it makes a hoop and it'll roll across the ground so fast like a wheel, like a tire, it'll catch you. And when it catches you, it coils around one of your legs and trips you up. And then it takes this whip tail and whips you with it. And then it takes the tip of his tail, this gets me, the tip of his tail, sticks it up your nose and tries to feel if you're still breathing, and then it consumes you. The snake's is a couple inches around. Anyway, but that's a really old wives' tale, an old myth that I don't see how people believe it. Another one I heard that was just as crazy was this old guy told me one time. He said, I've always heard. He said, tell me if this. And then this is the funny thing. He didn't come up saying, I got to tell you this crazy myth I heard about a snake. That's not what he said. He came up and was wanting to know if what he was told about a snake was true. And this is what he said. He said, yeah, I've always been told never run over a snake in your car, which I think is a good thing. Of course, you should never run over a snake in your car. I agree with that. And he said, because if it's a venomous snake, and that snake bites your tire, that it's capable, the venom is somehow can kill your car battery. Your car won't work the next day. and so I'm waiting for the punchline, but the guy's serious. He wants to know if the snake can do this. I'm like, no, a snake can't do that. A snake's not going to bite your car's tire, and as a result, its venom kill your car's battery. No, it doesn't. Well, no. Anyway, but he was dead serious and just had always wondered that because he'd always been told that. Another myth that I hear is about when I talk about snakes giving birth. I always ask, not always, but sometimes I'll ask my audience, how do snakes give birth? And I always hear someone yell out, they lay eggs. Well, and it's true. There are some snakes that do lay eggs, but not all snakes. Your pythons lay eggs, your cobras, your mambas, your coral snakes lay eggs, your rat snakes, your king snakes, your milk snakes, those lay eggs. Your anacondas, your boa constrictors. Anacondas are a type of boa constrictor. And garter snakes, non-venomous water snakes. All those snakes have live birth, okay? And so which one do rattlesnakes and copperheads do? Neither one. So there's three ways snakes give birth. There's viviparous, oviparous, and ovoviviparous. It's very confusing. We have a video on this on our YouTube channel. It is called The 3-Way Snakes Give Birth. So copperheads, cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes, it's not technically live birth and it's not eggs. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. So we film it and you get to watch it. So after this, podcast is over, if you want to go to SnakesAreUsTV, click on the video called The 3-Way Snakes Give Birth, and you can watch and see exactly what I'm talking about. It's actually pretty cool. Okay. Let's go to the chat here real quick and see what we're saying. Chris Taylor says, black racers won't chase you. It'll raise up and looks at you in the grass. Now, that is a good thing to bring up, Chris, because black racers, as well as coach whips, will do this thing with a fake and attack. Now, I've heard this for many, many years, and I've always wondered if it's true. And I just assumed it was not true because most things about snakes are not true. But there was one time, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe longer than that, that I got to test it out because conditions were perfect and it just worked out. I've caught tons of black racers before, and they're vicious snakes. You pick them up, and before you can drop them, they've bitten you 3 times or more on the hand, you know. And so they don't hesitate to bite. They're very skittish, very fast, very flighty snakes, very nervous snakes. So this one time I'm walking behind a building, and there along the edge of the building is about a 3-foot long black racer. Black racers are non-venomous snakes. And I was standing in between the field behind me. The black racer is there, and then the building. So I've got this black racer cornered, okay? So for him to escape, he's going to get past me. So what this snake does is he kind of stands up, raises his head a good almost 12 inches off the ground, and he kind of lunges at me and goes about maybe 2 or 3 feet across the ground coming at me with his mouth open to attack. Well, most people would have jumped out of the way, and they would have thought, oh man, I'm glad I moved out of the way. That snake would have gotten me if I hadn't moved out of the way. That snake, he just tried to attack me. And he's faster than me, and so, you know, the snake would have gotten me. Well, I wasn't scared of the snake, and I thought it was quite funny the snake was doing it, so I just stood my ground and waited for him to attack me. And he only went about maybe 3 feet, and as soon as he realized I wasn't going anywhere, the snake turned and took off along the building and went way around me and got away. So black racers will fake an attack. I've heard that they will do that, and there's one time in my life I have seen that happen, but they won't actually come over to you at full speed, headed to you to attack you. That's not what they do. Now, speaking of black snakes, black racers, I often hear people say, oh yeah, I got a black snake lives in my yard. Black snake lives out there in my building. I got a black snake lives on my porch. What does that mean? It means there's a snake that lives there that's black in color, but that doesn't tell us what kind of snake it is. Because there's several different species of snake that may be black in color, and there's no snake in America, at least, known as a black snake. That's a snake that a person doesn't know what it's called, so they call it a black snake, okay? But there's several that can be black. Now, often what they're talking about, at least here in the southeastern U.S., Georgia, where I live, most of the time they're talking about a black snake. They're talking about a rat snake. Now, black racers are also black, but rat snakes are really common around houses, climbing up on your porch to get a bird's nest, or, raiding your bird feeders, trying to get birds off of your bird feeders, and going into bird houses, eating the baby birds. So rat snakes are very common around houses doing that. And people have this misconception that those big rat snakes that get over 7 foot long will also eat copperheads that they'll come across. Well, if you go to some of my videos, especially there's a video called How to Keep Copperheads Out of Your Yard, go read the comments. People are putting there, just get some black snakes, put them in your yard. They'll take care of those copperheads. Black snakes, rat snakes, don't eat copperheads, okay? Now, black racers are known to eat many things, including other snakes. They've been known to eat copperheads. In northwest Georgia, and then beyond, we have the black king snake. That's it has some markings, but it's mainly black. That one, of course, eats copperheads. But rat snakes that are black are not snake eaters. They'll even spend the winter in the same den with copperheads and rattlesnakes. They're not snake eaters. So anyway, they're still good to have around, but they're not out, hunting down copperheads like people think they are. Let's go back to the chat real quick. Cheesy Cheetah says, I caught some blue racers in Wisconsin. Those are cool. Laurel is leaving, says, yeah, I would have ran a mile. Yes, snakes are fascinating to people. And, when you go to the zoo, talk about snakes being fascinating, what do you think is the #1 exhibit at any zoo in America? The number one exhibit is the primates, not the snakes. It's the primates. Reptiles are number two. But even though people don't like snakes, for the most part, most people don't like snakes. Some people do, most of them don't. It's still the second most visited exhibit at a zoo is the reptile. Okay. So next one is snakes unhinge their jaws to eat. Snakes unhinge their jaws to eat. So snakes do not unhinge their jaws. That's not what they do. Their jaw is not connected like ours is connected by a ligament. So our jaw kind of opens like this, you know. A snake's jaw opens like this, okay? The other thing is we have a chin, and our bone and our chin connects right here in the middle. A snake's lower jaw does not connect in the middle. So not only can the jaw open this way, the lower jaw can also open this way as well. And so it's not dislocating. That's not what it's doing. It's just a very movable skull that they have, and it's very pliable, and they can move it in many different ways. Speaking of that, that brings us to the next myth. How do you know if a snake is a venomous snake in the United States? Well, if it has a diamond or triangle shaped head, that spade shaped head, you know it's a venomous snake. Well, that's what they say, but is it actually true? No, it's not true, because now you know your copperheads, your cottonmouths, your rattlesnakes all have that diamond or triangular shaped head, right? Okay? But a lot of your harmless, non-venomous snakes have the ability to move their bones in their skull into that same shape that quick, because they know how many people believe that myth about head shape. So identifying a snake simply by the shape of its head alone and nothing else is not how you do it. Then they'll say, well, your venomous snakes have those slit cat-like elliptical pupils. Well, your copperheads, your cottonmouths, and your rattlesnakes, they do have that. Yeah. And then they'll say, well, your non-venomous snakes have the round pupils. Well, coral snakes have round pupils. Like, yeah, but that's the only one. But here's the thing. Those copperheads, those cottonmouths, and those rattlesnakes, in lower light, their pupil dilates and become round so they can see better, okay? And so you can see copperheads and rattlesnakes that don't always have elliptical pupils. They have round pupils, so we can't go by that either, okay? So when you're identifying snakes, you don't just look at one thing. You want to look at a few things, and the more markers you look for, the easier it is to identify. But when it comes to identifying snakes, the more you look at snakes, the more just pictures of snakes even. I tell people, if you want to learn to identify snakes, choose one snake. Then go on the internet and search 200 pictures of that species and just look at them, look at them, look at them. Now, the next time you might see a snake and you might not know what it is, but whichever one you've been learning, you're going to know if it's that one or not for sure, okay? All right, now a few more on here. If you have any myths, put them in the chat, and we'll see. Okay, so another myth involves poisonous snakes, poison versus venom. And I hear this from people all the time. They'll say, well, they're quick to correct people really quick if somebody calls a snake a poisonous snake. And then I'll ask, well, are there any poisonous snakes? Do poisonous snakes exist? And the answer is yes, there are poisonous snakes. One of which, the most famous one, is the keelback. And it eats amphibians that have toxins in them. And the keelback snake stores those toxins in glands on the back of its neck. So when a predator comes along, it kind of shows off its neck, exposes those poison glands. So if the predator goes to bite that snake, he gets a mouthful of poison. Now, he still may kill that snake, but over time, those predators learn to leave those types of snakes alone. So yeah, so there are poisonous snakes. But, when people talk about rattlesnakes, copperheads, and cottonmouths, poison and venom, those are both toxins. Of course, venom is injected, poison is swallowed or absorbed through your skin or inhaled, things like that. That's poisons. But there are, in other parts of the world, when we talk about a poisonous snake, that's the correct term, because in some languages there's not a term to differentiate poison versus venom. So in some parts of the world, if you do refer to it as a poisonous snake. So, somebody once said, knowledge is knowing the difference between a poisonous snake and a venomous snake. But wisdom is knowing you don't have to correct everybody that says poisonous snake when they mean a venomous snake. Okay. Another myth that we hear all the time is, you get bit by a snake, even if it's not a venomous snake, it can still hurt you really bad, because those things eat those nasty mice and rats, and those things carry diseases. So you just never know, what kind of disease and infection that you can get. Okay. Now, I think this is a myth. However, if you go on the internet and you start searching research that has been done involving infection from snake bites, I guess both venomous snakes and non-venomous snakes. I did this one time, and there was a lot of papers on there and things that I found that they were talking about, different bacteria they found and this and that, these different snake bites. But in those studies, that's what it was saying. But what I find more practically is, in doctors that I've talked to, is that infection from snake bite is extremely rare. Our teeth catch particles of food. That grows bacteria. That's what causes bad breath. Snakes' teeth don't do that. They don't have the bacteria load that you watching this video or listening to this podcast have. Snakes don't have that bacteria that you have. Okay? Infection from snake bite is so extremely rare in the real world that it's not something that is really worried about. Now, some people will come on here and say, "Oh, I don't believe that. I got bit by a snake and it swelled up and it did this and it did that." And I find that really hard to believe, because out of all the people that I know that have been bitten by non-venomous snakes, I don't see that. And I've never been bitten by a venomous snake. Not once in my life have I ever been bitten by a venomous snake. I hope to keep it that way. But what I have been bitten by is, I've been bitten by non-venomous snakes thousands of times. I don't even know. Never a venomous snake. But I've been bitten by non-venomous snakes, I don't even know how many times. And the amount of infections from them are still at zero. I've never had one single snake bite ever from a non-venomous snake ever get infected. Not one single time. Now, my friend Kyle, he got bit by a garter snake, and it grabbed on and chewed on him real good, and the snake's saliva got into his hand, and it started to itch. It got red and got a little swollen. He had a reaction from it, but that wasn't infection. That was a reaction to the proteins in the snake's saliva, which is designed to affect the garter snake's prey. But that's not infection. But you get bit by a venomous snake, okay? You get bit by a venomous snake, and people often say, "Hey, is it true like in the old cowboy movies? You got to, cut it open, do an X on it, and suck out the venom?" Well, no, don't do that. That is not true. That causes more damage, and you're not able to really getting the venom out by sucking it out. Doesn't do anything. And then say, "Well, you don't want to do that anyway because you get the venom in your mouth." Well, that's no good. That'll kill you. But that's not true either, because then again, venom is not necessarily poison. It's different than poison. You drink poison, you can die. If you get venom from a copperhead or a rattlesnake in your mouth, it doesn't do anything. If you swallow it, it doesn't do anything, unless you have an open cut in your mouth and your tongue, maybe an ulcer in your throat or your stomach. If it gets into that, well, it's just like you bit. So I wouldn't recommend doing that anyway. Don't get venom in your mouth, okay? But it doesn't affect you like you think it would in that way. Another one that I get all the time, a question about snake bite, is people will ask, "Well, I heard that if you get bit by a venomous snake, You keep one of these little stun guns with you, and you can put that stun gun on that bite and you just shock it. And the electricity neutralizes the venom, right? Okay. That actually does not work at all. Okay, you're just going to be a shocked snake bite victim. That's all it does. You would have to now. Hang on. Let me clarify this. It would work in one instance. There is one way that it would work. The way it would work and be successful in neutralizing the venom is you would have to have the electricity turned up to the point that it would neutralize your entire arm, okay? Your skin, your bone, your blood vessels. It would just destroy every bit of that. Then it will also destroy the venom, okay? But then that's it, okay? Other than that, a stun gun, a taser does not neutralize venom. And people swear about, well, my dog got bit and I did it to him and he was fine. Well, what because of the stun gun? That's not why your dog was fine, you know? Speaking of getting bit, one thing we hear all the time is they'll say, well, what about antihistamines, like Benadryl, things like that? You give that to your dog, and it won't save his life, but it'll buy him time to get to the vet. Well, snake venom don't have any histamines in them. Histamines are not released. Benadryl and antihistamines are very effective against insect stings and bites where histamines are released. It doesn't do anything for snake bite. Now, if you do have an allergic reaction to venom, it can help that, but most bites don't have that. It can happen, but you're just going to be a sleepy snake bite victim. Now, I've heard some people say that one thing that happens with a pit viper venomation is you can have a dramatic drop in blood pressure, and from what I understand, I don't know how significant it is, but Benadryl has also been known to somewhat slightly possibly lower your blood pressure. Well, that's the last thing you want. You've already got a snake making you have extremely low blood pressure. You don't want Benadryl doing that too. But people will swear by it. They'll say, well, I give it to my dogs and all this stuff. And another thing that people will do is they will be worried about their dog getting bit by a snake, and they'll give them the rattlesnake vaccine, this rattlesnake vaccine. Okay? Does that work? It does not work. Okay? And people were like, well, maybe it don't work, but maybe it won't help, but it ain't gonna hurt anything, right? That's not true either. Veterinarians who say, well, dogs I've treated that have the snake bite vaccine do better than dogs I've treated that don't have the snake bite vaccine. Well, that tells me this vet probably doesn't know a whole lot about venomations, because you can't compare two snake bites. They're never the same. Every bite injects a different amount of venom at a different depth because of different fang lengths on different size snakes in a different part of the body, at a different animal with a different body weight, with different health issues. No two bites are ever the same. So you can't compare one to the other. And the way they think this works, so let's just say you get the flu vaccine, okay? They give you the flu vaccine, they inject it into your body, and your body starts to build up antibodies against this flu vaccine they put in your body, all right? So then you can't get the flu, all right? So somebody sneezes next to you who has the flu, and you inhale this particle that's so small you can't even see it with the naked eye, the flu virus. Well, your antibodies then go to attack that and destroy it, and now you don't get the flu. Well, when a venomous snake bites you, they're not injecting a particle that you can't see with the naked eye. It's a dripping, copious amounts of venom that your body couldn't build up enough antibodies, to really counteract this just from, a routine shot rattlesnake vaccine. And even the company who makes that stuff doesn't have any evidence showing that it actually does it and it works. And you know what else? Here's the other thing about that stuff. If you get stung by a bee, say you get stung by a honeybee, okay, that does not mean that you're now allergic to bee venom. What it does mean is you have the potential to develop an allergic reaction, and you don't really know that you develop an allergic reaction until you get stung again. And then if it's a severe allergic reaction, you can go into anaphylactic shock, your airway swells up, you die because you can't breathe. not because the bee that stung you happens to be deadly, but because you develop a sensitivity to its venom. And we've seen that with some dogs who get this vaccine. They've never been bit by a snake before, but they've received the vaccine and they get their first snake bite and they develop a sensitivity to the venom. They don't know this because they've never been bit before. Then they get their first snake bite and they go into anaphylactic shock. There's already been cases of that. So I'm not a vet, but vets that I know that know their stuff will never recommend that you get the rattlesnake fake vaccine. Okay? Because that one doesn't work. Speaking of snake bite treatments, there was an old remedy that I thought was pretty funny. What they basically said was, if you get bit by a venomous snake, you want to catch one of your chickens. And this is a long time ago when everybody had chickens, you know. You catch one of your chickens, you kill the chicken, and you cut the chicken in half, and you lay the half chicken on the wound. You bandage it on there so it doesn't fall off. And you leave it on there till the chicken turns black. How long is that going to take? Nobody's going to want to be around you during this process, I'm sure. And what it does, the chicken's body draws out the venom, and it takes out the venom upon itself, and you'll be fine. And you know, the weird thing was, when they were doing this, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, whenever it was, this was working 9 out of 10 times. That's because 9 out of the 10 snakes were non-venomous snakes. And they didn't know which, here we are in 2025, we have the internet, and even today people don't know which snakes are venomous and which ones are not. At least most people don't know. I think 100 years ago, they surely didn't know. They just thought, oh, all of them will kill you. So you have to treat every snake bite as if it's going to kill you. And most of the snake bites were non-venomous snakes, and they thought that these treatments work. So let's go to the chat real quick. So Laurel is leaving, says, not sure if you covered this, but are baby copperheads more venomous than adult copperheads? And I did not even have it in my notes, and that is one that we need to bring up. So are baby snakes more venomous than adult snakes? This is a question, when I do a live show, I'll often ask this question. I'll say, if I have to get bit by a snake, and the person says, hey, this rattlesnake's going to bite you, okay? Nothing you can do about it. But you get to choose if it's a little baby rattlesnake or a big old mama rattlesnake. Which one should I choose? Should I choose the mama? Should I choose a little baby? Well, a few hands will go up and say that I should choose the mama snake. No, I'm sorry. A few hands go up and say I should choose the baby. But most of the hands in the audience always go up and say, no, you better choose the mama. Don't choose the baby. And I'll say, well, why is that? Well, the babies can't control how much venom they put out. They just kind of give it all to you. Okay? And that's not true. We're taught that it's true, but it's not true. Now, here's what is true. It is thought that some venomous snakes, the baby snakes, drop for drop, the baby snakes, their venom might possibly be a little more potent in some baby snakes than an adult snake. But even that doesn't matter. Think of it this way. This big old mama snake has big old mama-sized fangs, mama-sized venom glands. She's, mama-sized meals, okay? She doesn't need more venom to kill something. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that the baby can't. The baby's young and dumb. He don't know any better. He gives it all to you. Just loads you up with venom, okay? So let's say the baby gives you 100% of his venom. And let's make up a number. Let's say the mom snake gives you 10% of her venom. That 10% by volume is still more than the baby's got in his whole body. I don't care if it's a copperhead, a rattlesnake, a king cobra, a black mamba. As long as you're choosing among the same species, hope it's the smallest one you can find. The bigger the snake, the bigger the fangs. The bigger the fangs, the bigger the venom glands. The bigger the venom glands, the bigger the hospital bill is going to be, okay? It's the opposite of what we're taught. I don't want to get bit by a venomous snake. But if I had to choose, I would choose the smallest one I could find 100% of the time. Okay, as long as I'm choosing among the same species. Okay, but people people don't often care about the truth. They just care about what makes the best story. All right, so Laurel is leaving. She asks, "Is the green tail really a telltale sign that the snake is indeed a copperhead?" Well, no, because copperheads do have a lime, neon green, or yellow tail tip when they're born. They do have that. So do cottonmouths. So do pygmy rattlesnakes. Now I'm just talking about snakes that live here in the southeastern U.S. But those snakes, all three of those, pygmy rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, which is your water moccasin, and your copperheads, when they're born, have that neon lime green tail. They use as a lure. That they do caudal luring. They'll get in some leaf litter somewhere they'll hide. They'll put the tail up in front of their face. They're all camouflaged and hidden, and they stick the tail up and they start to wiggle it, move it. And a lizard or maybe a toad thinks, oh, that's a little easy meal, a little green inchworm over there, and they go over to bite the tail, and the snake gets his first meal. As the snake gets a few meals, that tail color fades to dark brown or black. But copperheads, cottonmouths, and pygmy rattlesnakes are all born with that, and as juveniles have that tail color. Okay. Yeah, she said, then using the stun gun causes cancer. There's no telling. Yeah, I don't know, but it's definitely not going to help the the venom for sure. Okay, but like I said, people don't care about the truth. Now, I mentioned this book right here earlier, and I don't want to bore you by just reading passages from this book, but I'm going to anyway because there's some things in here that I think were kind of hilarious. There's a bunch of stories in here. And I've highlighted some of them. I'm not going to read all these things to you. I just went through and highlighted some for my own enjoyment of going back and reading some of this funny stuff. But the author of this book is trying to highlight things that are fake, that are false information about snakes. And I found that interesting. But what I found more interesting in this book is the fact that some of the things he puts in the book that is truth, it's also ridiculous. Okay. Okay. So here's what I'm talking about. So this is ridiculous to me. So this is what he writes. The idea that a venomous snake is a fierce snake is wrong. Once they realize that their human owner is not an enemy, any urge to bite disappears and is reserved only for their prey. In America, rattlesnakes are occasionally kept as pets, and the owner becomes very fond of them, and apparently they of him. Now, you can see this in one of my videos called How Not to Hold a Rattlesnake. So, yeah, it's possible to do stupid things and hold snakes and not get bit for time. But even that guy that was holding it, he had been bit by one of those before. So according to this guy, it says the only poisonous snake in Africa that cannot be tamed is the puff adder. That's what I was told. And I'm not gonna argue with the guy who told me that, but I would like to see someone try to tame a black mamba, he says. Now, then he goes on to say, an example of a venomous snake that makes a good pet. Hang on, let me read that again, okay? This is a book from the library, the public library here in Georgia. Let me read this. An example of a venomous snake that makes a good pet is the Indian cobra. That's what he said in the book. Then he describes it as, this snake is docility itself. It is the most docile snake. Indian cobra's best pet snake. That's not true. Don't go get an Indian cobra. They don't make good pets, okay? Regardless of what this book says. And this is a book about fake stuff, but after he points out fake stuff, he puts truth in there, and that's what he believes is truth. Okay, then he says, but do tame snakes like their owners. And he says, I think so mostly. In spite of the double crosser named Eve in the Bible, snakes prefer women to men because women are warmer and softer. So, women that have pet snakes, your snakes like you better than the men that have pet snakes because you are warmer and softer, according to this guy who thinks that Indian cobras make really good pets for people, right? Another thing, when we talk about on our videos about getting rid of snakes that are in your yard, we talk about different tips of how to keep snakes out of your yard. Somebody will always come on and say, "Oh, just get a mongoose. Go get you a mongoose." Well, I don't know where you live, but here in the United States, we don't have mongooses. Mongoose. Is it mongoose? Mongoose? Mongooses? We don't have those. So we can't just go get a mongoose, okay? Um, and then he goes on talking about how the mongoose is really good at killing animals. And he talks about how there's another animal that's even better at killing snakes than a mongoose, and that's the skunk, and how the skunk doesn't normally just spray out its spray, that they actually smell very sweet. Their fur has a very sweet smell. I don't know who this guy is. I've had a pet skunk that was descented, and it still stunk, okay? So speaking of mongoose, he says, I recently read about an island in the Pacific. It was a pleasant place and fertile, but it had one drawback. It was infested by snakes. Snakes were everywhere, and the natives were almost in a state of terror. Okay, and he goes on to say about how they would ask sailors who came to the island, please bring us some mongooses, the mongoose, or whatever you call them. Bring us some mongooses. So one day, a sailor shows up with several of these mongooses, okay? And they turn them loose. Well, guess what happens? These mongoose go out there and they start destroying these snakes. They're eating these snakes like crazy. And it gets to the point to where they've almost eaten all the snakes. The mongoose are fighting over snakes because there's not enough of them to go around. And these islanders lived heavily off of chickens they raised. And then the mongoose, because there are no more snakes, started going and killing all the chickens. And then because there's no natural predators, they're overrun with mongoose. They're like, hey, what kills mongoose? Can you bring that to the island next? Okay. So if you have an animal that naturally lives where you live, let it live there. I understand not wanting to have venomous snakes right there in your yard. There's things you can do to lessen having that, but typically you don't want to just be getting rid of animals completely because you don't like them or understand them. I'm turning over this one part in this book. This is the last part I have to read, and this is amazing. I highlighted it and I circled this part because I was like, I've got to read this. All right, so here's what it says. This is amazing. So listen to this. Should you ever have the occasion to deal with anybody who has been bitten by a snake and is distressed, and if no doctor and no anti-venom is available, here's what you do. You tell this person that you have a certain cure that you always keep handy, and that it has never failed to heal a snake bite victim. He said, because even if it's a non-venomous snake, it's a waste of your time to tell the person it's harmless, because they just won't believe you. So don't even tell them that. Don't tell them, oh, it's a corn snake that bit you. Let them believe it's venomous. That's what he says. But tell them I have a cure. Then he says, then get some Epsom salt and then kind of scratch the wound up with something and rub vigorously the salt into the wound. He said the more it hurts, the better. He said then take a couple clumps of Epsom salt and have them eat it. And the worse it tastes, the better. Okay? And then what he claims is that, let's see, he says, if the snake was non-venomous, which is probable, then he will recover quickly without complications induced by fear and suggestion in his own mind that he's going to die. But it says, however, if the snake was in fact poisonous that bit him, and you've assured him that your cure works, and you've rubbed salt in his wound, you made him eat clumps of salt. But if it was a venomous snake, then it says that he may become handicapped. That's what it says. And it says he may be paralyzed with fear temporarily. Should the snake actually be deadly, he will have no hope. But at any rate, you will have done something to help him and not to harm him as he dies. What in the world? That's what's in this book. That is, it just blows my mind, the things people believe about snakes. So anyway, as one of the craziest things I've ever read in a snake book about snakes. But when it comes to snake myths and people talking about snakes and believing this or believing that, people are going to believe whatever they want to believe, and people will kind of look for things to justify their belief in something sometimes, even if the belief is sometimes kind of ridiculous and things. So for your own self, I would say stop worrying what people think about you. Because we just showed you, people are not interested in the truth. People are interested in the good story. Even if they know the story about you is not true, if it's a good story that's fun to tell people, gossips will tell it, knowing those thoughts. So sometimes it's not even worth trying to explain yourself to these people. So stop worrying what these people think about you, because most of the time these people are not thinking about you. Now, for those of you that hang out with people who gossip, okay, and they spread false information about other people, what you better believe, what you better understand is that when you're not around, they're saying the same thing about you. So don't entertain those people. Well, people say, well, people just come to me all the time. People just unload on me and they just gossip me and tell me all this stuff. That's because you accept that. That's because you invite that. If people come to you and start bad-mouthing other people, you can shut them down pretty quickly and say, I'm not interested in talking about this. I don't want to gossip about anybody. You can do that, but people don't want to do that. They like to hear the juicy stuff sometimes. But what you got to remember is other people's opinion of you is none of your business. So don't even worry about it. Guys, thank y'all so much for coming. Thank y'all for being here and joining me in the live chat. I really enjoyed this time, and I will be back next week. What was it? Episode 24 of the SnakesAreUsTV podcast. 24 episodes. We're almost at 24 episodes. I think that is absolutely incredible. What are we going to talk about next week? I have no idea. We'll think of something. If you have an idea of what you want me to talk about, put it in the comment section of the video, and maybe we'll do it if it's a good one. So, guys, remember one thing. Jesus loves you. I do too. Y'all have a great day. Thank you very much for joining me, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review. That helps me so much in pushing this podcast out to even more people. I record every Thursday, so check back next week for a new episode of the SnakesAreUsTV podcast.